Good evening. Rebecca, could you please give the invocation this evening? All right, good evening, guys. I just release blessing and prosperity over you in Jesus' name. Right now, in the name of Jesus, I just release the glory and grace and goodness of God over this entire city. And right now, I just say that we have more than enough to do what we are called to do. And so, God, I just thank you that you release abundance of finance and that every ask is fulfilled and every need is completed. And God, I thank you that even in that, we'll see the goodness of our God. And so, God, I just release grace and empowerment over this council, that they will be able to talk and ask the right questions and have all the answers, because we know that when we need wisdom, we can just ask you, Lord, and you release it abundantly. So I just release wisdom over this council in Jesus' name. Thanks. Thank you, Rebecca. So now we'll officially call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller.
Here.
Alderpersons Borneman.
Here.
McClanathan.
Here.
Ross is absent. Parker.
Here.
Busker.
Here.
Brashaw is absent. Meisig.
Here.
And Berberay.
Here.
Thank you. If you could please stand and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Alderman Parker.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Alderman Parker, the meeting is yours.
Thank you. First, the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Approval by Alderman McClanahan, second by Alderman Meisig.
Oh, Busker.
Alderman Busker? Okay. Sorry. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, the approval of the minutes from the Committee of a Whole on January 13th, 2020. We have a motion for approval.
So moved. Second.
Approval by Alderman Busker, second by Alderman Mizak. All those any opposed? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Public comments? None? Item number 7, the presentation of bond pricing for fire and police pension debt presented by Steve Roberts and Kevin McKenna.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So let me make sure I understand this. I think I go forward with this button. Yeah, okay. So we've been having conversations with the city about another way of financing your pension, your unfunded pension obligations. And you're starting to see interest in Illinois with this alternative structure, because, you know, pensions are weighing down on communities, and you're starting to see buzz on consolidation, kind of like at the county level when you have IMRF. The theory behind it is you're going to get higher investment returns on your proceeds. So how I start this presentation is, you can look, we have right up here a picture of the city of Freeport. You have an unfunded pension obligation in the police fund, and this is your latest available information, of $26 million. In fire, 21.7, total of 40, sorry, my eyes are going, 48 million. Your funded ratio is 47%. It's basically looking at your liabilities, PV'd back to today, how many assets are in the system. That is going to be your unfunded, and then you look at a percentage. 47% isn't the lowest that we have seen, but 38% is getting pretty low. That's a debt. That is the debt of the city of Freeport, and it's accruing at an interest rate of 6.75%. You could see the payroll growth assumption that we'll get into at 3.25%. And your period that you're amortizing this debt. Yes, sir.
Excuse me. Randy would like to say something. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Please, please.
I believe the 38% is incorrect. It should be where our police pension fund is currently at 61.8%.
Okay.
So
The police fund, okay.
for fire, excuse me, not fire.
Fire, okay.
I gotta correct
apologize. And
myself.
I don't have the numbers in front of me,
Yeah.
but thank you for the clarification.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, please. That's right. So the term is 22 years. As you can see, next one, as I mentioned before, it's 6 3/4 that you're accruing this debt. So basically, what is this alternative way of funding it? It's pretty simple. It's an arbitrage play. You issue taxable bonds with the theory is that, well, not the theory, you will be paying lower on the taxable bonds. We're estimating, we did your last few bond issues. We have a pretty solid understanding of what your debt would have in interest rates, 3.78%. So basically, it's an arbitrage play. The difference between the 6 3/4 and the 3.78% creates savings. And you can see we estimate, and we're going to get into, because POBs, what they're called, pension obligation bonds, are different than refunding bonds that you guys did. But we can right now think of it that way. And if you were to do this, the estimated savings would be just south of $16 million versus how you're doing it now.
And arbitrage for the council, it's trading one debt for another. So,
What are POBs? I've gotten into some of this. Basically, POBs are, they are taking the present value of the future pension costs, liabilities, netting them to today, and then comparing them to the assets, the cash, the investments that the system has, and that is creating what I'll call the unfunded pension liability. As I mentioned, what would happen is you would issue taxable bonds if you choose to move forward, and the proceeds would be placed into the system, and under the model that I show here, the systems would become 100% funded. You could also fund it to 90% to 80%, whatever you choose. POBs are attractive when interest rates are a lot lower because, as you guys probably know, you're reading the press, rates are at their absolute lowest right now, so this makes it attractive. We and your MA would never recommend going forward as that 6.75% and the taxable get closer because you're going to need to generate significant savings for this to make sense. I mentioned, let's think of this like I could say a mortgage, you're refining your home, but it's different because the economics of the transactions are not fixed into the last maturity of the bonds. Basically, what drives the savings ultimately is how you expect the proceeds once you put them into the system, how they perform over the term of the bonds. It's not a year-to-year look. It's over 20 years. What do you expect? And I'll steal my own thunder. If you don't expect over 20 years that you can earn 3 7/8, I'd argue 4%, 4.2, you shouldn't do the transaction, full stop. So I always recommend, the city and other clients look at over this time period, looking 10 years, include 08, look at what percentage you've earned in the pension systems. That does not guarantee future results, but that at least gives you a barometer to assess this strategy. What we do is a little different is we dig deep in the numbers and analyze that savings amount. And this is a model we came up, and last time we presented this to council, the actuary was here, and we're very close to how your unfunded amortizes over 20 years. I will be the first to say, I'm a bond guy. We are not actuaries, but this gives you a good idea. If you choose to move on a transaction, there would be another party at the table, which would be your independent actuary that would help us model it. And here's what it is. You can see your total unfunded, and that's the third column from the left. And then you see the annual payment to amortize it, and then interest, because as I mentioned, you're accruing interest at 6 3/4. And you can see from 2019, $3 million down to 5.9. What does that show you is why there's a problem is the ski slope here. It's not as steep as I've seen, but I mentioned before, we have a payroll growth assumption built in there. And what you see is an interest rate on an interest rate, which if you extend it out would be exponential, but you can see over 20 years that rising cost. And the concern, as the finance people and you guys know, is how are you going to fund that going into the future is the question. And a lot of communities in Illinois are facing that question. So I'm going to skip this page because it's basically keying off of this page, is looking at savings. You look at the third column, and you might have to look at your book. These numbers are pretty small. That annual payment to amortize the UAL, the unfunded portion, is basically exactly from the page 2 before. So that's how the structure that we showed. So then you can see principal interest, and that interest at 3.78%, and net total debt service, and we're simply looking at that annual payment, if you want to look in 2020, the 3.2 million, and comparing it to a taxable bond issue, which would be 2.4%, or I'm sorry, 2.4 million, and the annual savings is in that gray box, and it's right around 780,000 per year estimated savings if you were to do the POB structure. Then what we do to analyze it is look total savings, as I mentioned before, of 15.7 million. But that's not how the bond market looks at it. We actually PV it to today, and then that's 11.5, and this is how you do a refunding too. And then you compare the 11.5 to how much you're actually, I'll call it refinancing, and you get 24%, and that's a lot of savings. GFOA recommends municipalities to move forward on a refunding at 3%. This is 24%, but I'm going to get into it. It should be, because this is not a riskless structure. Now, we show both two ways of doing this, and I've actually not had a community choose what I just showed you, because as you can see, that green part is the savings, but you can look at it, we haven't fixed the problem there. There's still you're still going to have to raise taxes, you're still going to have to fund that because the payment is still increasing. And Kevin and I completed a transaction for Winnebago County. They looked at it, didn't like this structure. So what they choose or can choose is a more level debt service structure. And it basically looks like that. And as you can see, savings is at the back end, and you're going to see less savings up front. You can structure it to have a little savings, what Winnebago County chose to do, because then you have a little leeway, but that fixes the problem of the upward sloping curve by doing more level debt service, and this is how it looks. So as you can see, the third column to the left, 3.2 million to 5.9, again, that was taken from that page about 4 or 5 ago. And then we put the principal, the interest, it's now 3.68% because of how you're structuring it. And you can see the savings, which for this, just for you, we structured it with 5,000 in savings, and then it ramps up to 2.4. Gross savings of 19.5, present value of 12 million, or 25%. Again, a lot of savings. And another reason that clients and municipalities like this is rating agencies don't penalize, because what they look at, if you structure all your savings up front, let's say in the first 4 years, that's a red flag that maybe you're doing this for political purposes, and that's the exact opposite of that. And rating agencies get comfortable with that you're trying to fix a problem, not the next election. I don't spend a lot of time on this page because the benefits are manifest. Basically, you're generating potential savings. You can structure it how you'd like. It's basically one obligation for another. You lower your hurdle rate, because basically right now, if you don't earn 6.75%, a new unfunded opens up next year. Your hurdle rate goes to 3.78% versus 6.75. And this is over the life of the transaction, as I mentioned before. You can see this is with complying with state funding, 90% by 2040. The question is, will they extend that? But you know, you can argue that's kicking the can down the road.
And hasn't reached.
Council's purposes, what he's talking about is there is a bill that has not gotten out of committee to extend that debt out to 2045 or 2050. Kicking it further down the road to the 90%.
Yep. And again, actually spent more time than I claimed I was, but it does eliminate the unfunded portion of it. I spend more time on this because it took us a long time to get Winnebago County done, I think about a year and a half. Because, let's first throw it out there, GFOA recommends against this structure, and we're gonna get into why. But the chief reason is the first one. This is an arbitrage play. If I shouldn't use the word play, it makes it sound arbitrage. But basically, you look at this, if you can't earn the bond yield, that 3.7 and change that I mentioned, you will have a loss. You shouldn't have done the transaction. If you earn more, then the savings will be greater than I showed you. If you earn right at the 6.75, the savings is exactly as I said it. And if you earn between those two rates, and those two being the bond yield and the 6.75, you'll still save, but it will be less. That is the chief risk of the transaction, and that's how the economics will be ultimately decided. Another concern in consolidation, we don't take any kind of pro or con on it, but just argue the facts, is counties get comfortable with this structure because they're an IMRF, and that is a pool of money, and their yields are 7.5. We looked at it over every time period, 15%. So they get comfortable, but sometimes with local units, they might be less, so they shouldn't do it. And another one is a large dollar amount is going into the systems at one time. So zero cost averaging, other kind of thoughts there. Counties don't have that concern because you're just buying a portion of the total pool, which is 55 billion or something like that. But there is the risk that if right now how it stands, you do a $50 million transaction, put it in, what could happen? We have seen over the past year, anything can, that could be a risk. We put this one in because we've had a few clients concerned because all of the money has to be turned over to the systems. We had one pretty large client look and say, well, Stefan, let's keep it out and we'll invest it. But the problem is it does not extinguish the unfunded. It's an offsetting asset to a liability, and rating agencies won't actually give you credit for it. So it will have to be put in the systems. POBs are a hard liability, and we put this one, back in the day, some communities thought funding their pensions was a soft obligation. Oh, Stefan, we're gonna take a pension funding holiday. But now I would argue it's a hard liability. Both are. You're gonna have to pay debt service, and you're gonna have to pay into your systems, or there's gonna be issues down the road because I hate some communities, I won't mention who, are having their state share intercepted, and I will be the first. These communities are not you, but it did happen. One concern is some additional unfundeds could, and probably will open up. This is not a magic solution that you won't have unfundeds in the future. The worst thing you could have is someone say, this is great, let's do it because it's going to fix all of our problems. No, it could open up additional, but you're not, it could anyway. As I mentioned, if you learn under 6 3/4, you're gonna open up another one. This is fixing the present problem and putting in the system to, at the time of pricing, be 100% funded. Normal costs. This is another, to get back into rating agencies, we saw one community get downgraded 3 notches because they funded their normal costs in a bond issue, and that's considered budgetary, you're using it for budgetary relief. We're not talking about that. We're only talking about the unfunded portion, not the normal costs. You'll still have to continue to pay those. If you do it right, and Kevin could jump in on this too, is rating treatment is neutral. When we did Winnebago County, they asked one question what the proceeds were for, and they affirmed, and they asked more questions about the local economy, because there's ways of mitigating concerns from rating agencies, and the big one is, let's take the savings up front and let's balance our budget, and that's not what we're talking about here either. They will treat the rating analysis, this is debt, but they do it now anyway. It's called debt and pension obligations, so this change does not change that. I put in there, S&P has stated they'll have a negative view of POBs when one of the following conditions, you can see the bonds are a mechanism for short-term budget relief. That's not what we're talking about. You don't address the problem long-term, and what we do is we worked with Spear on transactions, and we recommend if you choose to move forward, you do a pension funding policy that is passed along with the bond resolution, and we can let you see it. It basically takes all concerns and tries to mitigate them by saying you guys realize it, but you're not doing it for instance, the first one, short-term budgetary relief. Debt capacity. That it could take all your debt capacity, your home rule. You don't have debt capacity. Well, you do, but you don't have a legal one. What we say, I mentioned the policy, just communicate with the rating agencies why you're doing it and that you're not doing it for the reasons that they would ding you for. I mentioned that GFOA recommends against this. And this is how we build, for instance, one example, again, Winnebago County, because it's close, I'll use it, is it's an arbitrage play. That's their number one reason, and we agree. 2, POBs are complex, that you might put derivatives, swaps on it. No one's talking about swaps here. You used to see that some bigger communities, they'd swap it, it'd be risky. The swaps have their own risks. We're talking about taxable bonds. I mentioned 3, that your debt burden will be increased and you might not have the capacity, your home rule. POBs are frequently structured in a manner that defers principal payments. Again, we're not talking about that. And the rating agencies might be negative on this structure. Again, we try to mitigate that, and we've been successful in the past. You know, the last 2 pension consolidation, I could go through, but I'm guessing there's people here that know more than I do, so I can go through it, but it's a reality. They're talking about it, how best to structure. We can go through it, but.
And the governor's already signed the bill.
Right.
He's expected to sign it. The governor's already signed the bill and expected to sign it. Now they're just seating the board. The call's gone out for the executive director of the fire pension board. Police pension's already been set. And there's still a lot of discussion as to how municipalities are going to be paid. They're going to wait and see the pension boards. We heard on Thursday, Brad Cole from IML say that they will figure out what your 90% what you have to get to meet your 90%, which this last year we just went over 90%, but the recommended actuary amount, which was, if you remember, was significantly higher than what than what we did. That we may be just getting the bill, but as I talked to Kevin before, it's all conjecture at this point. We don't know. We're 28 months away from actual consolidation.
Good evening, I'm Kevin McCann from Spirit, and I just have a couple comments. I mean, Stefan did a really good job, but I just want to get it down to the very basic facts here. What we're talking about is replacing your pension obligation that already exists with a bond obligation. As he mentioned, the rate on the new bonds would be something under 4%. The rate on your pension, you're accruing interest at 6 3/4. And he said, you know, look at what you did for the last 10 years. Well, we were here, if you recall, about 13 months ago, and at that time, Randy had done that research, and it said that over the past 10 years, you've earned 6.22% in your pension funds. So, again, the past is not necessarily prologue to the future, but if you've been earning over 6% and you can replace that or fund that with money at less than 4%, that's a pretty good deal. And that's really what the arbitrage play here is, that you borrow at under 4 and you invest as you have been and hopefully make the 6%. Again, as Stefan said, this takes care of your problem as of today. It doesn't freeze you in time. You're going to have ongoing changes in your pensions no matter what. And you may be getting ahead of the, you know, especially if this works out, you get ahead of the game, that's great. You might fall behind sometime because investments don't always earn the same. Again, this whole idea with the consolidation is to make it a lot like IMRF, and IMRF is a pretty consistent, but even they have good years and bad years. It's just that their bad years tend to be a whole lot better than some others' bad years, so it works a little bit better, and people have a lot of confidence, and that's, I think, where the consolidation is really going to help rather than having a whole lot of individual pension funds trying to beat the curve. So those are my comments on it.
So one other thing just for council as we go forward, this only relieves the payment towards the debt. We would still have our yearly payment. And to give you an idea, even with the adjustments that we've made I actually support going forward this, but I want to make sure that council's clear on this. So last year's amount, that if I looked at my numbers right, was we gained about 3.1 million. So this right around what the cost of the bond is. Between 3.1 and 3.2 million is what we got from, that was from a partial increase in electric and gas. We're going to have the full increase this year. However, we have seen, Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, we have seen some increase in our pension costs due to the retirements as we go forward. So that is, when we're talking about that, so we would still, our yearly payments would still be in the area of $780,000 to 1.2 million is what we're talking about on top of this. So if we go through this, we will be facing we'll have to generate revenue from other places, or we're going to have to increase our overall property tax.
Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I might get you guys too on that, but I'm going to start with City Manager and Director Bucas too, because I mean you hit some of the main points too, and he said it. He said if you don't hit these numbers, it didn't make sense. But just a few questions. I'll start with Director Bucas on this. With our projections then, and this was kind of going with what Manager Crowe was saying, with our current property tax designation plus an anticipated 1 year of the increase, what is the number that we're looking at for a full year? Because I know we haven't had a full year of it yet. We had about a little over half a year.
You're talking about the property tax?
Property tax, plus all the money, well, let's put it, all the money that we anticipate going to pensions under the tax, the property tax, and replacement, I think we also did on it.
Where's property replacement taxes also?
So what's the total that we can anticipate for a year on that?
Property tax right now, we're levying about $2.4 million for pensions, and we can anticipate on the electric side, I believe we budgeted about $600,000 from electric utility tax, and we're looking at about $400,000 on the natural gas income.
And what do we have for the property replacement? Was that something between 200,000 and 300,000?
Right now, we're looking at about $400,000 for personal property replacement tax.
Some of that's all going to fire and police pensions.
Right. Right now, it's all going to fire, police, pension. We're not putting anything towards the library.
Right. So that's around, was it 3.8 million, if you take all those sources right now?
Correct.
And looking at the I'll call it proposal 2 from Baird in regards to that, where we're having more of the payments up front to achieve that, the goal there, as opposed to having the ballooning payments later on. We would need in year 1 about 3.226. It says 3.226. So that's just on the debt service. And then, if I heard Manager Crow correctly, it could be up to another 1.2 on just normal operating costs.
I
Is
mean,
that
you
Yeah,
know,
it's the normal operating costs from the last actuary was running just over, almost just under $900,000. So you're looking at about $1 million.
I gave you a range between
Sure.
780 and 1.2, depending on our retirements.
So this is very rough math. I mean, we're going to refine this, well, not that your numbers are rough, but I mean, in regards to what we're dealing with on our end here, you're looking at potentially maybe another 300,000 if we were to incorporate it at just for status quo. In year 1, we'd be looking at around 300,000 more that we'd have to come up with one way or the other, either through expenses, revenue sources, things of that nature. Is that ballpark?
That's roughly what we looked at. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Can I continue, Chair?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you. Looking at, and I appreciate what council was saying in regards to putting it all in at once versus maybe somewhere having some sort of agreements with the board. Because you put in 48 million, and then you have even a 10% correction or something of that nature. Suddenly you're dealing with unfunded liabilities again. What, and this is for any of the 3 or 4 of you, what would you anticipate would be kind of our plan for implementation of this into the investment? I know you said it all has to go to the board, or to the boards, I guess, to the plans on it, but what kind of flexibility do we have in regards to where does it all get put to help maybe hedge against a 10% correction or worse?
Well, I think that's why we'd have to talk to or the pension boards would have to talk to their investment advisors, Marquette Associates, who they're currently using, and how they're going to place the money. As Stefan pointed out, that's a concern right now. Is, the market's pretty high. It, returned over 20% last year. It's been on a roll for the last 11 years. There's going to be a day where we're going to have a correction, whether it's going to be a 10%, 20% or more, who knows, and when it's going to happen. So it's a risk you take if you invest the whole thing all at one time.
Follow-up, Chair? Yes, please. So we may have some flexibility, but we have to talk to the boards about what they're willing to do. Is that yeah, sure. Please pop in at any time.
Some issuers have decided, I mentioned zero cost averaging, or basically they would look at it and they would keep portions of it out of the system, and they the inflows would go, because then on high markets, low markets, you'd basically hopefully come out average. So you don't have to put it all on one side, you can have that offsetting asset, or you could do a smaller bond issue.
So is, I know like with our water and sewer bonds, we have 3 years to spend the revenue.
And this is taxable, so.
So what is our restrictions that way?
Well, if you borrowed it all, you would have no restrictions because it's taxable bonds.
Okay.
But yeah, as Stefan said, you don't have to borrow it all. You could just say, look, let's get our feet wet a little bit, so let's do half. And then if it's performing fine, and 3 years from now, do the other half. Or you could borrow it all and then just say, okay, we're going to put 25% in, we're going to transfer 25% each year. The difficulty then is that you are sitting there with that money that you borrowed at, let's say, treasuries plus 150, 1.5% over treasuries, and now you're investing it in treasuries, so you're losing money. So I think if you don't want to do it all at once, then figure out what's a comfortable amount. You borrow that, go through the system. Next year, year after, come back, do the same thing.
I appreciate what you're saying on the opportunity lost on that. Director Bucus, I don't know, in reading about other communities, you read, the good stories and then the horror stories, of course. And I don't know, was it somewhere out on the West Coast? It was kind of a matter of timing type of thing. So while you had mentioned that over our last 10, I think you said we had, this was a year ago, but looking back a year ago, last 10, it averaged 6.22. Is that what the number was?
I believe that's correct, yes.
And if we're looking at this from a 20 to 22 year window, are you aware, are there any, and this isn't fair because I didn't ask you before, but are there any windows where over a 20 to 22 year window, we would have come out substantially worse than the 3.7 or 3.637 rate?
Well, if you look at, and there again, past performance is no guarantee of future, but the market has been averaging over 10% a year. You also have to consider too that we're going to be combining these monies in about 3 years, 2.5 years, with other pension funds. And the goal with the consolidation of the pensions is that we're supposed to get better returns. Mm-hmm. So you could assume, rightfully or wrongfully, that we're going to meet that 6.75 or better every year.
The one concern is we bond for it all now, and then there's a drop in the market, and we have to come in and they say you have to meet your requirements. We now have a new unfunded liability, but that will come back. Then it's the guidance as we go forward. The reason why Randy and I brought this back forward to you was because of consolidation and the fact the markets are low, and we see this as an opportunity to take advantage of both of those institutions. The other thing is this protects us from home rule costs, because one of the things we can do is we can tax to meet our requirements on any GO bonds that we have on the books as we go forward. Now, without referendum.
I got a follow up on that. I want to follow up on that. Let's look at loss of home rule impact here. We're going to have certain obligations that are already outstanding, notwithstanding this, but loss of home rule impact. What are our other options if we have this debt on the books here, outside of astronomical property taxes? What are our funding options in the event that we lose home rule here?
So there, go ahead, Randy. We've looked at this.
It would still be, your property tax would still be your major source of revenue. Right now, our property taxes are going towards pension costs. We're not using any property tax revenue for operations. Right. And so we'll just continue to keep the tax where it is. And then if we do lose home rule, any bond obligations we have do not fall under any ceilings as far as property taxes. So we're not going to be capped at any type of increase because we already have obligated ourselves to pay those pension, the bond costs. So this would just be another issue. In the past, what we've done is because we had the revenue, we've abated a lot of our bonds, but this would be something that we would continue to levy on the property taxes.
And that's part of the concern. Did you tell us previously, one of the two of you tell us previously that the gas and electric taxes would not go away? If we
That's correct. But what we did look at is where our impacts is our home rule motor fuel tax, food and beverage tax. There is some discussion at the attorney level that we would lose a portion of our home rule sales tax. It's whether it drops down to 1% or we have to get it reconfirmed, because home rule sales, there's a non-home rule sales tax you can keep up to 1%. Rockford actually went to court with a lost home rule and kept 1% of their sales tax. But food and beverage, the other thing that was interesting is we'll also lose all our stormwater fees. So the $4 that we have for stormwater will go away. That's you can only tax stormwater as a home rule, or have fees for stormwater based upon home rule.
I guess what I'm concerned with is getting into a scenario where you lose home rule, you lose some referendum votes on certain aspects, and then it's a chicken and egg thing, but you're dealing with saying, okay, we've got these bonds that can be paid with property taxes, but then you have literally, no other funding sources for the basic services, the large amount of which is the basic services that most constituents say they want with police and fire, and really getting yourself in a bind. But anyway, I guess there's more discussion to be had on that down the road. Thank you for giving me the ballpark figures there. That's helpful for determination down the road. I'd yield the further questions from other council members.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. Oh, you bet.
This can be for anyone, but so ideal turnout here would be that the city saves somewhere in the area of 19 million, the present value of 12 million in savings. Is that fair to say? So that's the ideal positive side. What is the, inverse of that? What's the worst case scenario? Because that sounds like it's the best case scenario, right?
No, that's not the best case scenario, but it's a reasonable scenario if on the upside. The idea is if you borrow at under 4 and you invest at 675, which is what you're being charged today by under the accrual rules of the pensions, that's where those numbers come from. So if you flip some of those assumptions, you still borrow under 4, but let's say you only make 5% on your investments, then you will earn less. You'll still be ahead because 5 is greater than 4. On the other hand, if the next 20 years was just like 2019, and for whatever reason we were all making, the stock market was up 20%, and through the pensions you can earn, you invest about half in the stock market and half in the bond market, so maybe you're earning 12 or 13% every year. You're going to make much more than that. I don't think that's reasonable. I would be very surprised if the stock market did that for 20 years. I'd be also very surprised if you only earned 5%. Because again, through the consolidation with a IMRF-like entity, I think it's more likely that you're going to continue to see a long-term investment closer to what you've been doing, the 6.22%, or IMRF 6 or 7%, which they've been doing for a very long time. So the numbers, 10, 12, $19 million, those I think are reasonable numbers given the assumptions based on where the market is today and based on what your past benefit of investing has done.
Sure. Yes.
You used the Winnebago example, Winnebago County as an example. What other communities, counties, municipalities somewhere in the area have gone this way or have chosen not to?
Well, I'll say this is Illinois has been very slow to POBs. If you look around you in states, Wisconsin, Michigan, they're pretty common, relatively common versus Illinois. But you're hitting on something is the state, how long ago was that? Did 10 billion. And they did normal cost too of about 20 to 30%. Gave a lot of local governments a bad taste. This was back in the day. This was 15 years. But you've seen Winnebago do it, you've seen Milan do it, Round Lake Park. But what I will say is we're getting a lot of interest from communities just with consolidation. I mean, I've had 3 discussions with people because they're starting to see this is a hard liability. There's not going to be pension holidays. But it would not be truthful to say that Illinois communities have been actively issuing, but we are seeing a lot of interest about where you are right now is where a lot of communities are, and they're considering it.
This was a hot topic at ILCMA. I mean, everybody was gathered around Baird's table, talking to them about this.
And I'll say it's a lot of Chicago suburbs that you just wouldn't think are actively looking at it. They are.
I just have one more. So you mentioned, I appreciate you having the page 16 here about the GFOA's recommendations. Pretty straightforward. They're not recommending these. Maybe you don't have an answer for this, but do you have other services you provide or other situations where the GFOA is advising against something where you're recommending it, or is this a unique case?
I'll first say that this is giving knowledge that this is an individual decision for each community to decide if it's right for you. This is not us pitching it, I'll say. But yes, all the time. I mean, they say competitive sales are the only way to go, except the long list, and Kevin will probably jump up and grab the microphone after this. But I would tend to disagree. Yes, to answer your question.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, thank you. I have no finance background. Just curious to, obviously you do, so I appreciate your opinion. And like I said, I appreciate page 16 here where, you're being objective about it. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Chair.
Yes.
Just, I don't want to lose track of the discussion on this, moving forward. What's a realistic time frame for further consideration?
So we wanted to introduce it here tonight based upon the conversation. We can go back and have a conversation and start looking at rates with Kevin and Stefan and show you what we're looking at, what the market is. The one question I didn't ask Kevin beforehand is, what do you see the impact that Moody's rated Illinois as junk bonds to the overall bond rating?
Well, there's a penalty for being in Illinois. But the market is so low that even Illinois got really great interest rates on their last sale, no matter how badly they were rated, because the market is so low and people are willing to take risks and they're willing to buy Illinois bonds. So yeah, I mean, you pay an extra 0.25% or 0.5% in some cases because you're in Illinois and not across the border or whatever. But, yeah.
So for the council, our last bond rating, they said they saw a potential for us to increase our bond rating over the last call because that you should remember that from the feedback. And since then we've added another 400 jobs. We've seen the headquarters for TriStar, and then LK Manufacturer as a principal distribution center here. And as you saw from the mayor's article, MetLife just announced they're adding another 150 jobs. Our EEV continues to go up, not at the rate which we would like, but it is going up. So that all will play into our bond rating. And another year of balanced budgets.
Can I make just one comment? As you think about this going forward, and you think about what happens if you lose home rule, how you gonna pay the bonds, et cetera. Parallel to that, think about if you lose home rule, how you gonna pay your pensions? Because I really think it's the same thing. It's not so much which of them, it's how you have a huge obligation of pensions, and you have to think about it. I mean, you know, yeah, anyway.
I appreciate that.
Any other comments? What is the pleasure of the council to do with this?
When will you have further information back for us?
We can have a discussion over the next 2 weeks and get some information back to you. I can get it out to council. Randy and I'll talk with Stefan, and Kevin will do a conference call, or
So,
start looking at what we can do, and then make a decision once we have the financials in front of us. And there'll be recommendations, because the market does go up and down, so.
you anticipate at
Is-
no later
is
than
2
the next
weeks
committee of the whole?
correct, as, or, what would you feel the turnaround time, Kevin?
Well, I think it's, when we have our conversation, I'm not sure exactly what the next step is in terms of, we'll chat and then we'll see what you want to do.
Okay. So we'll be back to council. We wanted to put this in front of you as information and as an option, since we felt it was a good time, since the market was down. When we may have them come back, next time we come back, we'll actually have the actuaries here too, that will give us all for Lautenbach or Naaman, because they're not only our actuaries, but they manage the payout for the pensions as well, so.
So we move this forward then? Just let it ride.
Yeah, just ask that you bring us something back by no later than the next committee of the whole meeting next month.
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
Next is item number 8, library presentation.
And for everybody, that your handouts are sitting at your table.
I wasn't sure that was going to work, but it did. And I'm glad I gave you guys all of the handouts so you can actually read the numbers. Okay. So the microphone is a lot better. Good job, Kurt. Okay. So let's start with some fun library facts before we get into our yearly statistics. So the library is 42,000 square feet. We have 17 City of Freeport employees, but on average, we probably employ about 15 people because of our turnover rate. We are open 3,163 hours a year. 13,880 people in residents of Freeport have library cards. And in November of 2019, the current management team, which is myself and the other 2 librarians that you have employed for the City of Freeport, hit their 1-year milestone of working together. So we had a whole lot to learn about the community, and so our numbers are slightly lower than the average numbers, but that's really, really good for how much has been changing in the past 2 years at the library. So now we're gonna look at the piece of paper that I gave you. So let's review some of the stats for 2019. We had 117,633 library visitors, and that is down from 128,198 from the 2017-2018 fiscal. The big difference here is going to be that we do not count all of the people that just come in to use the library but don't actually, that come into the building, but they aren't actually walking through the gates in the front door to actually get into the library. So this doesn't include anybody that's coming to a non-sponsored library program or coming in to use the cafe, using the bathrooms. A lot of that happens. We changed the way that we gathered some statistics, so we're more heavily relying on less human error and more using the technology, and that is also going to be reflected in some of the numbers. We have 3 study rooms that were used 517 times by 1,084 people. And we have 4 meeting rooms that were used 485 times. Then when we move on to the collection, our collection includes 137,584 items, and 134,739 of those are our print items or physical items, which would include anything that when you're walking through the library that you see on a library shelf. Those all circulated 130,000 times. And then our ebook and e-audio titles, anything that you can get on a device, whether it's a computer or a smart device. We have 2,845 that the Freeport Library actually owns, and those all circulated 10,941 times. So the circulation on those is it's very large. And that also would account for the number of people walking through the door. People are still using it and have library cards, they're just not physically entering the building. So our total circulation for 2019 was 141,836, which is up from the previous fiscal, which is great. But it also means that on average, every item in our collection has checked out at least one item, at least one time this year, which that's an average number. There are some things that don't check out. One thing that I did want to point out too is that we are part of a consortium. So there's about 160 libraries that we can borrow things from. And part of that consortium is that we all pool money together to get the e-audiobooks and the e-books. So our community actually has access to over 30,000 titles, not just 2,900. So that also is reflected in some of the circulation numbers. Now the most fun thing to look up is to see what actually checked out the most. So we have, which is not on your paper, but the number 1 checked out item is Dog Man. So people who have children will know what that is. It is a children's book, but it's by Dave Pilkney, and it has been the number 1 book, I would say, for probably 3 or 4 years, just in general for kids. The number 2 checked out item is actually the People magazine, which cracks me up. The number 1 TV show is Frasier. Number 1 movie is How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And then our top books that checked out for adults was Every Breath by Nicholas Sparks, The Reckoning by John Grisham, and Becoming by Michelle Obama. So that's the fun stuff. We'll keep going. Our computer usage. So in 2019, we replaced all 35 patron computers, and they were used 13,916 times for a total amount of time of 525 days. So you can see the immense need that this community for computer access. So 525 days is a lot. It's obviously more than what the library is open. Programming statistics. This is where the biggest jump in our services has been for the past year. We've had 343 in-house programs with 14,158 attendees. 80 programs were outreach, so those were hosted throughout the community of Freeport with 11,184. Those all of those outreach programs are done by myself and the other 2 librarians you recently met that earned the Employee of the Year award. So that's a lot of outreach. We're reaching, with 3 staff members, we're reaching over 11,000 people. So our savings in dollars, this is a calculation based on property taxes and the average cost of materials. So what people in our community have saved in dollars by using the library collection is $61,174, and then they saved $164,115 in ebooks and e-audio, and computer usage $153,600. So it's a lot of savings, and how beneficial we can be if you use your library card. Do you have any questions for me?
No questions or comments?
One comment. All right, I just wanted to say thanks for the presentation, thanks for the service, the important service that the library provides to the community. Also, I think I saw recently, they said a survey, people take more trips to the library in a given year than they do to any other activity, like going to a movie theater and things of that nature. So now, while that doesn't, I guess, account for what they're doing at the library each time, I think it underscores the variety of impact it has on a cross-section of the community. So thanks for the work you guys do.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
little off topic, but what are the hours of the cafe?
The cafe is open when it's open 9 to 4 Monday through Thursday through Friday, and okay, so it's 9 to 4 Monday through Saturday. Those are their hours.
Basic hours?
Yeah.
Okay. How has that been since it's open? Have you seen increased foot traffic into the library?
Yes, I mean, they're doing well. They're really good, but that's driven by who owns it and who's running it, and the cost savings that they can have because they have 2 places. So it's really great. We love Sarah. She's the barista that works down there, and I just think that they're doing really, really well. So.
Great. Well, thanks. You guys are doing well down there too. Thanks for the work
Thanks.
you're doing.
You're welcome.
No more questions. Thank you. Okay, next item, number 9, discussion of memorandum of understanding. Manager Crowe. It's too long to read it all, so.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is, to bring it back up to speed, this was presented to you in almost 2.5 years ago when we started this discussion. In fact, our Alderman Berberet he and I signed the initial letter saying we would go into negotiations when overreaching this. And so what this is a memorandum of understanding between us, the Park District, Highland Community Foundation, and Highland College. There are 2 parts to this agreement. Attorney Cox has been doing the negotiation along with myself. He's kind of been interesting because he's on, both he and I we're on the Highland Foundation board as well, and he's involved with, through his office, through the Highland Community College. But so he's had to, as he's gone through the negotiations, he's had to put on his different hats throughout. This has been as a struggle, but we have finally made some progress. The executive boards, both the foundation and the college, have agreed that putting a bike path around Highland Community College is a good deal. Now, our portion of this, as you will see it, and this is the map, is from the end of Empire. That's really important. Is the Empire? There is a portion of the bike path that belongs to Highland Community College, which we get called all the time, said, why haven't you cleared this? Why haven't you done anything with it? Why haven't we cleared trees out of it? It's falling apart. Well, part of this agreement was, from the very beginning, was that bike path would come to the city. We would get $30,000 from Highland Community Foundation and $51,000 from the Park District to resurface this, restore it. There's actually a culvert, correct me if I'm wrong, it's right near the elementary school that's washing out, that needs to be replaced. All of that would have been done. And that's the blue line, taking it from where it ends in Empire, that takes it down and completes it right as it goes around the college. Now, the Park District has gone forward, and I can go to the, and they said, all right, we get this agreement, we'll put in a grant, and they'll do all of the process of the engineering as part of this agreement, and put the bike path from our location down around, across, there's a park, and I'll show you another slide, down to, and that little loop there that you see is in Countryside Estates. Connect all of those. Now, the Park District owns that loop. Sorry, great. All right, there it goes. The Park District owns that little loop. We own the detention pond. They own the bike path around it. So it would connect all into that. This is it may take from up to 4 years to get the grant money. Has to get through, there's a whole bunch of, the ITEP grants have changed now. You actually have to have the engineering done ahead of time. They've set aside $133,000 or $139,000 to do all the pre-engineering on this, so that design work's being done. The other portion of it is, Kurt, I'm gonna have to close one and open the other one, right? All right, so the other portion of this is this area is, this area will become, the park will become ownership by the Park District and will become to the park. They do not have a park over here. So this will become the park for this neighborhood on this side. This is a farmer's field that, and this is part of that, but this is all owned by the foundation. Our portion of this is, you see this little easement, is when the bike path is completed, that then has to have an asphalt surface plate. Or I guess it's when it starts. When they start working on the bike path, we have to come in and put an easement down from our road here down and give them access, because they're building they have already built a building here where their farm equipment's stored. And they don't, right now they're going, so that's the other portion of this agreement. You see this little easement right here, that's owned by the college. That easement, we would put the surface in there. So that is what this MOU basically sets out. Originally, we are still going to have to do a separate MOU and understanding, intergovernmental agreement with the Park District on the maintenance. Originally, we tried to roll the maintenance of this path into this intergovernmental agreement. And I got your battery died, okay. The intergovernmental agreement was supposed to have the maintenance of the path in there. That became so cumbersome in trying to explain that to the foundation and Highland that we took this out, and we're going to do that as a separate agreement. But so this is gone. This is laid out. The one, why we're out getting you up to speed right now, is the foundation's getting ready to vote. Will be presented to the foundation. The one hiccup in this is dealing with how this property right here is going to be ceded to the Park District. Jack had a phone call with myself, Steve, and Dennis on this as we went forward, because we wanted to make sure that we understood what needed to go in here, because that is a new ask since we started this from the foundation. And to put that in there, make this ground usable because of the way they enter into this property right now. But the Park District has gone back and asked, and I don't think we have an answer back yet on that, do we, Steve? To have right of first refusal to buy this, but only buy it at $1. And what the foundation has asked them is buy it if they get, basically match any offer they get for this property, if they sell the property. Because Jack honestly feels that it'll be 4 years to, until the bike, 4.5 years until the work on the bike path starts based upon the ITEP grants. He has to have, the ITEP grants have not been released yet, but he has to have all the engineering approved through District 2 at IDOT before we can move forward on it. And to give you an idea of how long that takes, we had our ITEP grant approved almost in 2014. It took us into 2019 to get IDOT District 2 and IDOT proper to approve our engineering design. Now, we did make a few modifications in that engineering design as we went forward, but that's the change in the ITEP grant. The other thing is they have to have some form of easements already laid, where we had to purchase our easements after the engineering design was done and after the grant was forwarded. So, so that is kind of, you have the MOU. I gave each of you, sent each of you a copy of that MOU, and it was also posted with the agenda. So I am standing by, Steve and I are standing by for any questions on the MOU. And like I said, once it's approved by the foundation and by the Highland Board, then it will be approved by, we'll bring it back for formal approval. So I don't want to, when we move this forward, I don't want to necessarily put it, I made Debbie take it off the agenda list for next council meeting, because I don't know when we're going to get the formal approval from the foundation and from the executive board for Highland Community College, the trustees. But because we have to make these modifications going forward into it. So, standing by for questions.
Any comments or questions from the alderman?
Chair,
Yes.
it calls for the, under the existing portion here, of the, from the end of the red and then the blue over to, Pearl City Road, area there. It calls for the city to, keep it in good condition and to keep it clean, including, snow removal.
That's correct. Currently, we are not. It ends, our obligation ends at the end of and I'll turn that over to Dennis.
The snow removal for the bike path ends right around Emmanuel Lutheran. There's those two tree lines that kind of come in. There's 2 posts on each side. That is where our obligation ends for snow clearing.
And so we will take that over, and that's why we originally wanted the maintenance portion included in here, but that $81,000 is set up so that that bike path needs to be resurfaced. Our paver can do that, but it's supposed to cover the cost of the new asphalt and the underlayment, as well as replacing the culvert.
And the Park District is going to, under that maintenance section, maintenance of existing path section, they're going to share 50% of the costs.
Right, correct. But what the Park District wanted to do, and I guess I'm not being clear, they wanted to lay out exactly what that 50% meant. So we are still going to have to do another side letter with them.
And that's where I was wanted to get into is, I mean, I know this is long down the road, but I mean, what's going to be the cost structure for the, not the existing path, but the new path and things of that nature? Who's taking care of it? Who's replacing it? What's the cost structure?
So anything outside of the city limits, the Park District maintains. Jane Addams, and what we do is we are given, Jane Addams Trail is an example. We have a member, Randy is a member of the Jane Addams Trail Board. The Pecatonic Path is Dennis. They go, when we have maintenance that we have to do, we split the cost on an agreed amount but the park district is responsible for maintaining it as we go forward, outside the county, outside the city limits.
Sure.
Sure.
The outside the city limits part, is that all what's in red on the map?
That is correct.
So the city would have to cover what's in blue, or
That's
at least,
correct. That's all within this, so the school, I can't remember the name of the school off of.
Emmanuel Lutheran?
No, there is an elementary school,
Jones Farrar.
Yeah.
Jones Farrar is actually within the city limits.
Right.
And that, but, so that bike path goes up to right at the edge. Originally, we wanted to go in front of Jones Farrar, but the school, it would require to go on Highlands property. That was the original, on their road, and they didn't want a bike path on their road. So what we had to do is Dennis and Jack actually drove around the outside picking paths with the president of the college. And this has actually been taken over. I know the question is, well, Tim negotiated this. This is actually taken over by the board. They've actually been presented it, and the president of the board is the lead individual on this negotiations now.
Sure. Jim?
Manager Crowe, how does this affect our liability, personal liability from the standpoint of bike riders, accidents? Because now people are on their bikes, they're riding all over. We don't own it, we're not involved with it, and all of a sudden we're gonna be. What's our liability insurance?
Well, our liability will be covered in the portion of the bike path we own. So, and it's a great question, because if you don't know, the one area that the Illinois Supreme Courts have ruled that tort immunity does not apply to for municipalities is bike paths.
Okay.
So,
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Chair. All right, so could you summarize, in addition to the responsibilities we're gonna have on that stretch that we're taking over, and in addition to providing the curb and the pavement on that easement portion, what other liabilities is the city going to have under this MOU?
it's, that is.
Obligations, I should say.
Our obligation is the maintaining of the bike path within the city limits will be fully, basically this sets up our clearance in maintaining all of the bike path throughout the city, which we do anyway at this point. There just isn't, it is not memorialized in any agreement between us and the Park District.
So the majority of these obligations and liabilities are going to be on the other entities on here outside of what we just said. And then I see one other thing where the city's going to assist when possible with the district taking the lead in regards to finding funding sources, grants.
That's
and things of that
correct.
nature. But a lot of those, once you get outside in the red, you're talking about the district, the foundation.
Well, the foundation has been basically, and correct, they have said, college, this is you and the Park District going forward. Their only portion of this is that land. That land, it belongs to the foundation, and then they've even handed the $30,000 off to the college.
Okay.
Anybody else? What would you like to do with this?
Well, I would like to bring it forward for approval to council after the foundation and the Highland Community Board approve it, because there's still, as we said on Friday, we thought we had this agreement down, and Jack asked for one additional, so we've got to go back to the foundation board and back to so we are not ready. It's been 2.5 years since I briefed council on this, so I want to get you back up so you're not surprised when it comes back up. So that is, I would like to, as soon as they get approval, then get approval to bring in front of you.
So no action tonight?
No action tonight.
Before we move on,
Yes.
the area that would be Kiwanis, this is going to cross Kiwanis, right?
Yes,
Is there any plan to put in like a traffic control device there?
we've talked about that. that we will, as we move forward on that, it would be the prudent thing to do, and we're looking at options on that.
Great. That's all I have.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you.
All right, so,
Item number 10,
Ancillary benefit.
you may want to step there, so.
well, I'm gonna ask Steve to talk
Okay.
the Airbnb
Yeah, this
that
is
what?
discuss the ordinance.
Oh,
the revised handbook.
handbook, okay.
you
I'm
and-
sorry.
Okay.
I'm behind myself here, so. The handbook, I'm gonna grab my drawn-on handbook. So, we went through a major revision on this year's handbook. Of course, we had the cannabis. We knew we were gonna get into the revision based upon the cannabis. So we decided to look at many areas within the handbook. Thank you. And I want to give credit to the department heads that played with this, looked at this. So the fire chief and Director Bucas worked on the travel section, had some good ideas from Brad based upon what he had seen in his previous community and some recommendations he had. Kurt worked very diligently on the IT sections. And then Director Bucas, myself, Roxanne, and Deborah, Randy, I, and Deborah, and Roxanne worked on the other issues. And as we move forward, so I want to thank everybody for this. And so some of the things we go forward, of course, the changes or travel policy we've adopted, and what this puts us more in line with what we've negotiated with the contracts is the GSA travel amount, which is currently $35, and then an approval for travel outside the state of Illinois has to come to the city manager's office. We've seen an increasing demand, particularly in the fire and police service, for travel to schools outside the city. So we put that in there. Additionally, with the cannabis, we took out the medical marijuana and then put adult cannabis. What our rules and regulations, as always, we're allowed to keep a zero tolerance as a municipality because we are, it would jeopardize our drug-free workplace for grants going forward. So we updated some of the requirements from state law on the sexual harassment, which was basically now they have up to 365 days to report a sexual harassment upon leaving, departing. The IT policy, this is came out of for social media. If you remember, we've had some issues on dealing with social media that we've had employees representing the city on social media, and they said that they cannot represent themselves as the city unless they have approval from the city manager or the city council. On Facebook, we've had some people on their personal accounts that I'm an employee of the city, I will take care of it. And the language came in, Kurt going through his credentialing as a government IT director, got that along with the language dealing with IT requirements. It also limits, they cannot discuss projects that we're doing or negotiations that we're in on social media. As I said, we eliminated the medical marijuana sections, and that's a requirement by the state going forward. And then we added the adult cannabis section into the handbook. So we've also put in a section dealing with bringing pets and children to work. So reiterating to our staff that they cannot bring pets or children to work because this is a workplace. You might find some that are allergic, or we've had some issues with employees bringing sick children to work. We don't want to get other people sick within the department, so we made sure that we've reiterated that within the section. So that if you're given the opportunity to take sick leave if your children are sick. And the concern on, as we move forward with pets, is you may have some people that are either afraid of cats or dogs or are allergic to the animals. So we've also put the executive leave into the section. As we approved that in there, that was changed as we move forward. And then, of course, we did some post-accident drug screening. We added, made sure that people understand post-drug, post-accident. It wasn't clear, and also based upon some ADA, we made sure our ADA policy was up to date based upon some recommendations we came back from the AG investigation that's ongoing with ADA compliance. I'm just making sure I have everything covered. And so are there any questions from council on this?
Chair? Yes. Thank you. Do you have a copy in front of you? If
I do.
If I referenced the page, okay, red line version, page 22.
22.
Segment of speaking on behalf of the city of Freeport near the bottom of page 22, bullet line 1.
Okay, hold on. My pages are...
That's all right. Just giving you, let me know when you're there.
Can I move back to my desk so I can
Yeah.
write any notes that you may give me down on this? And hopefully each one of you, I did send out red line copies for everybody on the changes. So, all right, section 22. Yep.
Speaking on behalf of the city, bullet point 1, just to be clear, it indicates that employees are not authorized to speak on behalf of the city unless they have prior approval by the manager as on the executive portion, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, next page, 23, and going on to 24. Actually, it's at the top there. Let's see, the top of page, what is it, 23 there. Why did we delete the portion in regards to you may not sell or endorse any products or service which would be considered a conflict of interest as an employee of the city? What was the thought process on that?
It was, there wasn't any specific reason. I mean, we could add that section back into it without.
If we're gonna take it out, I would just like to know the reasoning. Otherwise, I mean, if there's no reason not to take it out, then.
Kurt, I'll ask Kurt because he may have had a specific reason.
In speaking with council, we determined that the city doesn't exactly have a product to sell that would be in competition with something an individual would sell, if that makes sense.
Randy would like to say something.
Another item too is that there's a code of ethics that many of us follow that do not allow us to endorse any products, especially if we're government, especially if we're in management positions.
And that code of ethics, so you know that the code of ethics that the council approved for early on 2 years ago in here was actually based upon the ICMA code of ethics. That those of us that are ICMA members, which are myself, Randy, and Andrew, are and Kirsten, but she's out at the, listening to the school, that we have to follow as members of that. So we adopted that code of ethics as the code of ethics for the city employees.
Well, Chair, I just see, this stuck out to me. Item number 10 on page 16 is almost, an employee shall not leverage his or her position for personal gain or benefit, which would be kind of what was describing what was removed, endorsing a product for their own benefit. I don't know.
If you think it's satisfactorily covered, that's fine. Elsewhere, I was just, when you see something of that nature deleted, just kind of curious as to what's the thought process behind that. Going on to page 30, what was the rationale for going to the quarter hour for paying overtime?
Randy?
I mean, it wasn't in there earlier, so.
Well, what the issue is we're getting people that are submitting 7 minutes overtime, and we were rounding, and we've actually gotten grievances filed against us because we had people that took 7 minutes of overtime and they wanted to be paid for 7 minutes of overtime.
Okay. I assume, does that also go into the change from 6 minutes to 7 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so we're having some issue. All right. That's a rational basis. If you got something pop on in. I got a few more things, but I got to get down to the page here really quick here. Let's see. I can skip past that one. Going down to page 62. I'm looking at some of the policies in regards to testing here. And sorry, this doesn't scroll very fast on here. What are the HHS cutoff levels? I mean, what are we going to be dealing with here if we implement it at the language that it's placed here? I understand the .02 for the alcohol, but what are we talking about for the HHS cutoff levels? What is that practically going to look like?
So the HHS, what they use is the cutoff level as laid out by the state highway for CDL, for cross-state, interstate commerce is established by the CDL. That's what the state has said we can enforce. Here's the interesting thing, since we already had if we did not already have a policy in our language, there has been some discussion that after the law had been passed, we could have not gone back and put it in, but because we already had the language in it, we could put it in, so.
Finally, page 74.
74.
And
Okay.
into 75.
This is
It's the A and B language there. There was some note in regards to potentially contradictions between paragraph subsection A and subsection B. I just asked that before we go to final reading on that, if we could just make sure that that's addressed. We don't need to get into it tonight. But at 1A and 1B on the travel policy, there's a note that says there might be a discrepancy in the use of vehicles in between 1A and 1B.
Page was it?
74 and 75.
she may have, so Roxanne and I had a discussion on the red line. It may be fixed in the regular document.
Okay.
So that,
What next?
the three comments that she made in here, we read through and corrected them, so.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
And you should have had, I sent you both the red line and the final, so you should have both.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
on the red line, top of page 44. Could you explain the sick leave as proposed?
If that's the paragraph I'm thinking about, we've had, which one of you, sick leave?
So
Her comment is, she did not recommend taking this out. I understand that because there's technically allowed to cure $1,300. People are allowed to accrue $1,300. What her comment was, we originally were going to take some of this language out as we wanted, but Roxanne recommended keeping it in there, which we did in the final copy. So what it was, what her comment was by sticking it out, that people get paid for sick time. It's rolled into the PEP plan if they're over $1,300. So she was saying that people could accrue large amounts of sick time over that period of time.
Just follow up. So it would be continuing to accrue while actually.
And we actually pay it out for that sick time into the PEP.
Okay.
So it would create an additional benefit.
I think the concern is that with any accrual that you generally do want to try to put a cap on that so that employees just cannot continue to just keep accruing there. So, I mean, you see that with other aspects of vacation time or whatever it is as well.
And when they get paid into their PEP plans, if for some reason, if they go over, the employees go over $1,300, they get paid into whatever certain, into additional money into the PEP.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Chair. Manager Crowe, you brought up about not having pets or children at work. Which section is that in?
It deals with the section where you look at ADA requirements for pets. It says the only, I gotta find the section here. Let me page through it here. Look for it. I had it when I was up there. Okay. So it says the city prohibits bringing a pet, domestic animal kept for the pleasure of companionship to work or having a pet in the city's buildings and premises with the exception of service animals. For persons of disabilities, then it defines what service animals are. And a person with disabilities, service animals, dogs. So it's the rewrite of that section.
My only question was with that is what the guideline, I'm not suggesting that, everyone bring their children to work, but for instances of, you've got firefighters that are on duty for 24 hours, is that going to prohibit them from their spouse bringing their child in to see them before they go to bed at night or anything like that?
There would not be prohibit them. What we're talking about is you come to work with a sick child.
Yeah, it's understandable. I just want to make sure that, we're not making it too awkward for them to do something like that. So I know how important that can be.
And I understand that because when I was on board ship, my wife brought our kids for dinner when she came. So I understand that.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
Manager Crowe, do you need this moved on towards the next council?
We would like to move to the next council meeting for first reading.
Make that motion.
Got a second?
Second.
Got a motion by Alderman McClanahan, second by Alderman Bouberet to move this on to the next council meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Okay, item number 11, Discussion of ordinance amending Part 8, Manager Crow and Attorney Cox.
So now I'll invite Steve up to the podium.
What's he talking about?
Good evening. What you've got in front of you is a modification just to, it was intended originally to just make sure that we're capturing the hotel motel tax on vacation rentals. That's VRBO, Airbnb, those sorts of things. We are starting to see one or two of those pop up, and those will likely continue to trend. So the modification simply adds vacation rentals as a defined term to our code, and adds that to Chapter 886, which is the hotel tax. So we're capturing the revenues on that. A couple other modifications just while we had the code open. There was just kind of an artifact that was contained in the hotel section. You'll see that in Section 2 of the ordinance. Section 836.01 actually had bed and breakfast houses defined as hotels, which can be problematic because hotels obviously have much more restrictive provisions. So we're just striking that out. And then equating vacation rentals to bed and breakfast establishments effectively. The one notable exception is the applicable code, fire and safety. Is that applicable to single-family residences, as is zoning? Bed and breakfast actually have a higher code standard, but the idea there is there's typically multiple guests in that at any given time. In doing something like that, the thinking was doing that to effectively a vacation rental, a single-family home, makes that not really viable. Because typically the business model there is you own a home and you move out of that home while somebody else moves in, or you entertain in your home. So again, keeping it applicable to single-family standards. And that's at a very high level what we're doing here.
We also moved the control of this from the Public Works Director to the Community and Economic Development Director, oversight of it. We didn't feel the Public Works Director was really in the right to maintain this. And the other thing is once if the council's pleasure is to pass this, then we file it with Airbnb, and then they become responsible for ensuring their VRBO as well. They become responsible for making sure that the Airbnb and their people that are registered with them and use their website pay us the hotel motel tax. It's something Galena has done very successfully, and it was brought. I'll give Nicole Haas credit. She brought this to our attention. She saw this coming up, and she said we ought to look at what Galena's doing.
Okay. Alderman or Attorney Cox, could you explain vacation rentals to me a little more?
Sure. A vacation rental, as it's defined here, is basically something that somebody's going to occupy for less than 30 days. And it's typically a single-family residence. So what that is if you own a single-family house. It'd be like your house. Right. There's a couple of models. The original Airbnb model actually was people that were on vacation, if they were visiting Freeport, would actually come and stay with you. And you would have an area of your house where you would let them stay and potentially show them around. Well, that's evolved to where Airbnb is more like a VRBO, which is vacation rental by owners, which I myself have used many times in other countries, where somebody owns a house, but it's primarily intended to be held for the use of others. So you would buy a house and charge people by the week or by the month to stay in that house.
So to clear it, if you're not charging them, say example, I go to Florida for 3 weeks and my grandson moves in and takes care of my house. I'm not charging him, obviously. I don't have to pay a city tax for that.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
These are actually houses that are listed on a particular, they're listed on the VRBO website or on the Airbnb website.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comment?
Yes.
Are we responsible for sanitation and food preparation in the B and Bs and because they're gonna be serving food to the people who are sitting down at breakfast in the morning?
So good question. The B and Bs, we actually had a fairly robust ordinance on that already.
Okay.
So what this ordinance does is it takes vacation rentals and simply equates it to what we already have for B and Bs. And the way that that's treated currently is you have to meet health department standards. The city actually doesn't administer that. It's the county health department, even within the city, has jurisdiction there. But a good question is to the B and Bs, because we aren't really doing anything with those here. We're just, since we already had that, again, fairly robust ordinance there, we just fit vacation rentals in there because they're effectively the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Make a motion to move this forward to the next council meeting for first reading.
Second. Got a motion by Alderman Borneman, second by Alderman McClanahan to move this forward. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Okay, next item's public comment. Tom?
I would have told Matt Summer, he does a good job, police department. And Jody Moore, I heard you do a good job, the mayor of Freeport. And you do a good job on the radio. I hear you on the radio every day at 10 after 11. I listen to it, and I know what you're saying about city. Thank you. And Carl, I just want to know what about the Kmart or something. Everyone was actually happy found day.
Thank you, Tom. Any other public comments? Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I don't know who said that, but Alderman Busker?
Second.
Second? Mizek? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We're adjourned.